Maximum strength takes a really short time for the body to do this kind of work. That's why it causes more nerve input. When it causes more nerve input to the muscles, again, these are things we're going to talk about in the future, is it hardens the muscle. Because you're not causing hypertrophy, you're causing more nerves to be activated. The muscle side effects look differently than if you're doing a hypertrophy phase. These are things we talk about more. These are things that you have to understand as you go into designing programs for people. Is, for instance, if I give a woman a program, I want her to do 3 to 5 reps because I know I'm increasing nerve input. The side effect of that is going to tighten her muscles because we're incorporating more muscles. So she looks better without getting more of a hypertrophy, which she can or can't do anyway. It's the same thing with athletes. Maximum strength is the basis for all the formulas that you get in science to increase speed, to increase power. Thus, it becomes a very important phase. And again, based on time. Hypertrophy. In bodybuilding in years, hypertrophy has been used. But when you use hypertrophy, understand that it's a timing. How long does the body take to use or to perform the number of repetitions that go along with hypertrophy? 3 to 5 reps for maximum strength may take a short period of time. Nerve input, because the body can't start the lactic acid system working or start to use glycogen as a fuel. Now, when we get to hypertrophy, we have a longer period of time. So there's a different energy system used. And this energy systems will come up as we talk more about recovery. These are 3 basic pieces to the puzzle when we start to design programs. Now, of course, off of maximum strength for sports comes power, which is the ability to move faster. We have muscle endurance, which is one of my favorites because muscle endurance has been so wrongly defined by coaches throughout the years, and we'll talk about that. Tudor was the first one to really get involved in this. Transition. Transition is another phase that I've used very extensively because it's that period between seasons that everybody just says, do something. But nobody ever really does anything. They just go out and jog for a while. So let's go a little more deeper into these phases. The anatomical adaptation. We showed the anatomical adaptation is the beginning point. You pick the exercises, you may pick a few more exercises for sports, you pick the exercise, you're getting the client or the athlete used to training. You're getting them used to doing proper form and to getting them on a base. I said before about the naming of the phases. Anatomical adaptation was used in sports. When I started to do periodization for bodybuilding, anatomical adaptation seemed to be kind of a confusing term. So we went more to an activation phase, which was to start the muscles up. In most of the phases that you use, depending on your clients or depending on the athletes you use, you're using energy systems and you're using repetitions. Culturally, in training, we have picked up these words like hypertrophy. Hypertrophy needs size. Well, you might want a woman athlete to do a certain repetition range to add some variation. But if you call it hypertrophy, she's going to think she's going to get big because obviously we know in today's day and age, everybody thinks they're going to get big. So you can rename the phases. Maximum strength. Again, you can use different names for maximum strength. Maximum nerve input, a hardness phase, a muscle preparatory phase. Again, you know what the repetitions are, you know what the purpose is. You have to name it for your client for whatever situation you're in. Power, we've pretty much covered power, what that is. Muscle endurance. This is the great part I love about muscle endurance. Anytime, first we have to understand that most training has come from bodybuilders. And bodybuilders are used to doing 6 to 8 reps, powerlifters are used to doing 3 to 5 reps. So when a bodybuilder says, I'm going to do high reps, they talk about 20 reps. But 20 reps isn't really high. It's actually one fiber type phase that has possible hypertrophy significance. But because it's a lot of work, everybody calls it a high rep phase. 20 reps is nothing. When you're talking about athletes in sports and muscle endurance, you're talking 40, 60, 80, 100 reps per series. I've had athletes do 80 reps. And what muscle endurance is, we're going to talk about maximum strength, and then we're going to deal with it into muscle endurance, because now through maximum strength, we've incorporated a lot more nerve input to a lot more muscles. So now we can come into muscle endurance. Muscle endurance is the ability to produce force per stroke. So in other words, if I'm a swimmer, I want to have the same power every time, or the same force every time I stroke in the water. If I'm a skier, if I'm any athlete, actually one time tutor told me in sprinting, 100-meter dash, the sprinter who fades last is the winner. But the steps could be up to 70 steps in a 100-meter dash. Now, is that power, 70 steps with force, or is it some form of muscle endurance? So if I'm running and producing force as hard as I can 70 times, how do I define this type of training? Because systematically we said it's power. But again, is it, if you're fading, if you're losing your ability to produce force, or you're fading? And again, in muscle endurance, I use muscle endurance, high repetition training, in what I call a cuts phase for bodybuilding or fitness people. Because when you're trying to lose weight, you need a phase that takes people off of being strong. So when we start to do high endurance, high repetition training for fitness people, we can call it a cuts phase, because now they're doing 20 or 30 reps, their body's burning a lot of fuel, they're using a lot more heart rate, and they can't be as strong as they can. And during these phases, in sports or in training, we can always have what we call a maintenance phase, which I haven't put in here right now. But even though we're going for power or muscle endurance or cuts, we always have a strength phase to creep the nerve input up. One of the phases that I found most interesting is the transition phase. Now, Tudor wrote about the transition phase in his book as an in-between phase where you can work stabilizer muscles, inner, outer, external rotation, some of the other small muscles in the body that stabilize the muscles. As I've become more and more in sports, I've found that the stabilizer muscles may need more attention than they've been given before. A stabilizer muscle meaning, if I'm going to do a shoulder press, if the small muscles in my scapula can't stabilize the scapula in one place, I can't do any more shoulder press. If I'm a swimmer and in my hips I can't keep my legs straight, then I have gluteus medius in the side of my legs that are stabilizer muscles that keep the leg in a straight line. This phase now is becoming more and more significant. And I feel that as you train more athletes and you start to look at your athlete and what their goals are, if a guy squats and his knees go in, it's his gluteus medius on the side of his hips. That's a stabilizer muscle. If a girl swimming in the water and her arm can't stay still, that's stabilizer muscles. I deal a lot with cross-country skiing. Their knees go in when they ski, and somebody told me one time that's the way the Russians designed the system. Now, the force to the ground is supposed to be in a straight line, so that's the way force is, but the Russians designed the knee going in because they never knew about stabilizer muscles that stabilize the power of the leg or the muscle strength of the leg. These are the things we look for. Body weight exercises. This is another thing that we're going to cover. Remember, when we define progression, there's a couple of ways in the pamphlets that you get out that we define progression. These definitions of how we define progression can also be used in body weight. programs, how to do push-ups, how to do sit-ups. I mean, let's face it, if you're going to do push-ups every day with no progression, you're doing to exhaustion every day. How are you going to get your push-ups? Push-ups in some relationship can be a strength exercise. So you're doing the same exercise to total exhaustion every day, and no wonder your push-ups and pull-ups don't go up. And a lot of kids are tested on it. So what we've brought up with defining progression, and we've looking at these exercises and these different systems, is what is our goal, and what are we trying to find, and how do we define the progressions for these various exercises so that we can lay out an annual plan. And that'll be the next part of our talk here, is how to design an annual plan.